If you've started learning tarot, there's a very high chance you've already made at least one of these mistakes, probably more. And the thing is, most beginners think they're doing something wrong or that tarot is just not clicking for them. But actually, it's usually just a few simple habits that are getting in the way. So in this video, I want to walk you through 7 of the most common tarot mistakes beginners make, and more importantly, how to fix them so reading starts to feel natural. And honestly, once you stop doing these, everything becomes so much easier. The first mistake is trying to memorize everything. This is probably the biggest one. Most people start tarot thinking they need to learn all 78 cards, all the meanings, upright, reversed, combinations, and they try to memorize it like it's a textbook. And then what happens is you pull a card, and instead of actually looking at it, you panic. You're sitting there thinking, what was the meaning again? Was this loss? Was this change? Was this something else? And you disconnect from the card completely. Let me give you a real example. Let's say you pull the Ten of Wands. If you've memorized, you might immediately think burden, responsibility, stress. But if you actually look at the card, you see someone carrying way too much, struggling to move forward, almost overwhelmed. That image already tells you the story. Maybe the message isn't just stress. Maybe it's you're taking on too much and it's slowing you down. That's a very different, more personal message. Tarot is not something you memorize. It's something you learn to understand. So instead of asking, what does this card mean? Start asking, what is happening in this card? Damitstigi. That shift alone changes everything. The second mistake is doubting your first intuition. This one is very subtle, but it happens all the time. You pull a card, and your mind immediately gives you an impression, and then you question it. You go, I don't know, that doesn't sound right. So you grab a guidebook, or you rethink it, or you change your answer completely. But here's the thing, your first impression is usually the most honest one. For example, imagine you pull the High Priestess. Your first thought might be, something feels hidden here. But then you look it up and think, oh no, it says intuition, spirituality. Maybe I was wrong. But you weren't wrong. Something hidden is intuition in action. You just didn't trust it. Tarot works through your subconscious. So the more you override your first instinct, the harder it becomes to read naturally. A simple practice you can start doing is this. Before you look anything up, pause and say your interpretation out loud. Even if it feels uncertain, you're training yourself to trust your own voice. The third mistake is asking the same question over and over again. This one is very tempting. You ask a question, you pull cards, and you don't like the answer. So you reshuffle and ask again, and again, and again, and suddenly you're confused because now you have 5 different answers to the same question. Let's say you ask, how does this person feel about me? Nah. The first spread shows distance or hesitation, but you don't like that, so you ask again, and now you get something more positive. So which one is true? This is where confusion comes in. Tarot isn't meant to give you a different answer every time. It's meant to reflect the energy at that moment. When you keep asking the same question, you're not getting clarity. You're creating noise. A better way to approach it is to sit with the first answer, even if you don't like it. And instead of repeating the question, unask a follow-up. Something like, what should I understand about this situation? That moves you forward instead of keeping you stuck. The fourth mistake is relying too much on the guidebook. Guidebooks are helpful, especially when you're starting, but they can quickly become a crutch. If every time you pull a card, your first instinct is to reach for the book, you're not really reading tarot. You're translating it. And tarot is not meant to be translated word for word. It's meant to be interpreted. For example, the Three of Cups is often described as celebration, friendship, community. But in a real reading, it could show something very different depending on the context. It could mean a reunion. It could mean too many outside influences. It could even hint at a third person involved in a situation. The guidebook gives you a foundation, but your intuition gives you the message. So try this. Look at the card first. Take a moment. Notice what stands out. Then, if you need to, check the guidebook after, not before. The fifth mistake is taking tarot too literally. This is something a lot of beginners don't even realize they're doing. You pull a card, and you interpret it exactly as it looks on the surface. For example, you pull the Death card, and your mind immediately goes to something ending in a very dramatic or even scary way. Or you pull the Tower and think something terrible is about to happen. But tarot is symbolic, not literal. Death doesn't usually mean physical death. It can mean transformation, letting go, a new chapter starting. The Tower doesn't always mean disaster. Sometimes it means a sudden realization, something that shakes you but actually frees you. Let's say you ask about your job and you pull Death. A literal reading might make you panic, but a symbolic reading might say, "This phase of your career is ending. Something new wants to begin." Usiang. Same card. Completely different experience. So instead of asking, "What does this literally mean?" Start asking, "What is this trying to show me?" The sixth mistake is reading when you're too emotional. This is a big one, especially when you're reading for yourself. If you're anxious, upset, or overthinking, your reading will reflect that, not necessarily the situation. For example, if you're feeling insecure about a relationship and you pull a neutral card, you might interpret it negatively. Because that's your emotional state. It's like trying to see clearly through fog. That doesn't mean you can't read when you're emotional, but it does mean you need to be aware of it. Sometimes the best thing you can do is pause. Take a breath, come back later when you feel more grounded. Or ask a different kind of question like, "What do I need to focus on right now?" Moss. That shifts the reading from reactive to supportive. The seventh mistake is overcomplicating the reading. This usually happens when you start learning spreads, combinations, positions, and suddenly you feel like you need to analyze everything deeply. You pull 3 cards, and instead of reading them as a story, you try to decode each one separately, then combine meanings, then second-guess everything. And you end up more confused than when you started. Tarot doesn't have to be complicated. Let's say you pull 3 cards that clearly show a progression: struggle, change, and relief. That's already a complete message. You don't need to overanalyze it. The more you simplify, the clearer your readings become. Think of it like this. Tarot is telling you a story, not giving you a puzzle to solve. And actually, let me give you one extra tip that can make a huge difference, something most people don't realize at the beginning. A lot of beginners try really hard to be right when they read tarot. You pull cards, and you feel like you need to get the correct meaning. So you overthink, you second-guess, you try to match what you're seeing with what you think it should mean. But tarot isn't a test. There isn't one perfect answer you're supposed to land on. There are layers, there are different angles, there are messages that unfold as you sit with them. For example, you might do a reading and feel unsure. And then later, something happens, and suddenly the message makes complete sense. That doesn't mean you were wrong. It just means the message needed time to reveal itself. So instead of asking, "Am I right?" try asking, "What feels true here?" That creates space instead of pressure. And that's where your intuition actually works best. So if you recognize yourself in any of these, that's completely normal. Every tarot reader goes through this stage. The difference is, once you become aware of these mistakes, you can start shifting how you approach your readings. And that's when tarot starts to feel less like something you're trying to figure out, and more like something you're actually connecting with. If you enjoyed this and you want to keep learning tarot in a way that actually makes sense, make sure to subscribe. And thank you for being here. Have a magical day.